It's Monday, January 26, 2026. And if you're waking up this morning and feeling like the ground beneath your feet is, I don't know, vibrating a little differently than it did a few years ago, you are not imagining it.
No, not at all.
The whole conversation has shifted. We aren't really talking about what if scenarios for, the distant future anymore.
Right?
We're talking about what experts are now calling eminent and fundamental issues.
That's exactly right. The luxury of treating risk as some kind of theoretical debate is gone. We're just in the thick of it now.
And to help us navigate this new reality, we are doing a deep dive today into the 2026 Risk Governance Priorities Survey. This comes from the DCRO Institute.
A really important source.
It is. And before we get into the heavy stuff, I think we need to establish who we're actually listening to here. Because this isn't like a Twitter poll.
Oh, far from it. The DCRO Institute is the world's leading source for risk governance training and credentialing. So when they survey their members, you're getting data from board directors, from C-suite execs.
The actual decision makers.
The actual decision makers.
Yeah.
In over 60 countries across 6 continents, these are the people who have to sign off on strategy. They're the ones who are, legally responsible when it all goes wrong.
So this document is basically a map of the collective anxiety of the global boardroom.
And their priorities. It's the pulse of the people in charge.
Okay. And right at the top of this report, there's a quote from a respondent that, it honestly stopped me in my tracks. They said that global politics have put us in an economy of war.
It's a striking phrase, isn't it?
It really is. It suggests we need a completely different operating system for how we do business. If we're in an economy of war, then the old rules of, just-in-time everything, they probably don't apply.
That is exactly the conclusion the data points to. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack what that phrase actually means for a business that isn't, making tanks or fighter jets. We're going to look at 3 massive shifts here. First, the collapse of the post-World War II order. Second, the positive risk-taking that's needed to survive the AI revolution. And third, the really lagging state of human governance.
And that all comes back to speed.
It does. The speed of change, what the survey calls velocity risk, is just outpacing the ability of boards to actually govern.
The velocity risk, I want to put a pin in that, because that idea that speed itself is the risk factor is fascinating. But let's start with the big geopolitical picture. The survey mentions Davos 2026.
Right.
Usually Davos is all high-minded, futuristic, maybe a little out-of-touch optimism, but the respondent said the vibe this year was completely different.
It was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
In previous years, the risks they talked about were often hypothetical, things that might happen in a decade. This year, the focus was squarely on the breakdown of the world order.
Not a what-if anymore.
Not at all. One respondent specifically pointed to the Canadian Prime Minister's speech as a major signal. He was listing risks that are no longer possibilities, but present realities. The conversation wasn't, how do we prevent this? It was, how do we survive this?
So let's drill down into that economy of war comment. Because most of our listeners, they're running tech firms or retail or logistics. Why does that mindset apply to them?
Because war in this context doesn't necessarily mean troops on the ground. It's about the weaponization of the plumbing of the global economy. The survey respondents are saying that trust in long-standing partners has just shattered. The assumption that you can rely on shared values or dependable treaties, that's been replaced by, and this is a quote from the text, whims, retribution, and a short-term mindset.
Wow. So it's like we're moving from a game of chess, which has rules, to, a cage match.
That's a very fair analogy. And it brings up some very specific anxieties in the data. The survey highlights deep concern about U.S. geopolitical volatility. It explicitly mentions worries over American aggression towards allies.
That's a big shift in tone.
It is. And, we're not taking a political stance here. We're just reporting what the risk community is saying.
Of course.
But the implication is that sanctions, tariffs, supply chain disruptions, they're now coming from the very places that used to be the bedrock of stability. So if you're a European manufacturer or an Asian tech firm, you used to worry about rogue states.
Right.
Now you have to worry about your oldest allies changing the terms of trade overnight.
So if you're a CEO, the rules-based system we've been talking about since 1945 is what? Is it just gone?
Well, one respondent put it very bluntly, it is being destroyed.
Is it destroyed?
Yes. So if your business model relies on the free flow of capital or global supply chains, that ground is gone. You can't just plan for growth in the old sense anymore. You have to plan for resilience. You have to assume your access to resources could just be cut off.
Which brings us to the internal pressure cooker. If geopolitics is the external threat, then the internal one is technology. And this is where I felt the survey revealed a serious conflict. There's this massive fear of missing out with AI,
FOMO, yeah.
but it's colliding with a fear of messing up.
That tension is the defining characteristic of 2026. On one hand, you have people saying falling behind the curve is not acceptable. You don't integrate AI, you're obsolete.
Right.
But on the other hand, integrating these tools introduces what they're calling concentration risk.
Explain that. Because usually concentration risk means, too many eggs in one basket, one supplier for a critical part. How does that apply to AI?
It's the exact same concept, just digital. Think about it. If every company in your industry is using the same large language model or the same cloud provider, you have a systemic vulnerability.
Ah, I see.
You might think you're diversified, but if the underlying brain of your operation is the same as everyone else's, and that provider fails or gets poisoned with bad data, the entire industry goes down at once.
So the risk is hidden in the third-party platform? You might not even know you have it.
Exactly. And the survey notes that judgment is increasingly mediated by algorithms, which is a very polite way of saying the board doesn't actually know how the decisions are being made.
They just see the output.
They see the output, but the logic, the why, it's locked inside a black box they didn't build.
This gets into some of the tech shifts happening right now. The survey flags agentic AI. We hear that term a lot. Agentic. Does that just mean it's smarter?
No, it means it has agency.
Agent.
It doesn't just answer a prompt. It takes action to achieve a goal. Traditional software waits for you to click a button. Agentic AI sees a situation, decides on a course of action, and just does it.
Okay, give me a concrete example of where this hits the risk profile. Where does agency become dangerous?
Look at banking. The survey points to this rapid move toward atomic trade settlements.
Atomic in the sense of
Go.
small or nuclear.
Atomic in the computer science sense, meaning indivisible and instantaneous. In the past, a trade had a settlement period, right? A few days. That gap allowed for human review, for error correction.
A cooling off period.
Exactly. Atomic settlement means the trade executes and settles in milliseconds. It is irrevocable, instantly.
So if an agentic AI decides to dump a stock based on a false rumor, the money is gone before a human even blinks.
Precisely. One respondent said that with these digital challenger banks, a run on the bank can happen while everyone is sleeping. By the time the board wakes up, the liquidity crisis is already terminal. You need risk controls that operate at machine speed.
That sounds terrifying. It sounds like the logical response is to just pull the plug. But the DCRO Institute isn't suggesting we go back to stone tablets, right?
No, and this is the really important pivot point. They introduced the concept of positive risk-taking.
That sounds like an oxymoron. Risk management is usually about saying no.
That's the old view. Risk management 1.0. Positive risk-taking means building a governance structure that allows you to say yes safely. It's not about avoiding the tech. It's about having the guardrails in place so you can innovate without blowing up the company.
So you have to take the risk to get the reward.
You have to.
Right.
But you have to know exactly how much risk you're taking. It's about calculated exposure, not blind gambling.
But there's a variable here that could break even the best guardrails. The survey mentions quantum computing.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is kind of the sleeper hit of the survey.
We've been hearing quantum is coming for a decade. Is it actually relevant to 2026?
The survey argues it's relevant now because of the preparation gap.
The gap.
The development of quantum tech is exponential. It gets faster and faster. But our laws, our regulations, our board education, that's all linear. It moves slowly. The fear is that quantum capability will suddenly break existing encryption overnight.
So the risk isn't just the machine, it's that the machine is improving faster than we can write laws about it.
That's it. If you haven't been preparing your data hygiene for a post-quantum world, you won't have time to react when it arrives. You'll be trying to lock the door after the walls have already dissolved.
Okay, so we have geopolitics collapsing, AI acting on its own, and quantum looming. Let's add the physical reality to this. The survey shows that climate and cyber have evolved. Not new topics, but the flavor is different.
It is. Let's take climate first. 5 years ago, climate was often a corporate social responsibility slide. It was about reputation.
Right, saving the polar bears.
Exactly. In 2026, the survey says climate and sustainability have moved to the absolute core of strategy. It's about economic survival.
Is that driven by the market or by regulators?
It's both, but the regulatory pressure is becoming very tangible. The survey highlights the Canadian financial sector and OSFI, the regulator there. They are revising frameworks to force institutions to account for climate risk in their capital buffers.
Meaning, if you have high climate risk, you have to hold more cash.
Essentially, yes. And this is driving real business changes. The survey predicts a wave of mergers among financial cooperatives
Why?
because the cost of compliance, the need for green skills, data modeling,
Yeah.
it's so high that small players just can't survive alone. They need economies of scale. So climate policy is directly driving industry consolidation,
Wow. That's a hard financial reality.
not a PR stunt.
And then there's cyber, again, always on the list. But you said the nature of the threat has shifted from theft to truth.
Correct. We used to worry about hackers stealing credit card numbers. That's bad, but it's manageable. The new face of cyber risk is AI-amplified misinformation.
The reputational damage point.
It's weaponized narrative. Imagine a competitor or a state actor using AI to generate a completely convincing but totally false video of your CEO resigning, or a swarm of bots spreading a rumor that your product is dangerous.
And because of the atomic speed of markets we just talked about, the stock crashes before you can even issue a denial.
The damage is done before the truth puts its boots on. And the survey also links this to physical infrastructure. With the economy of war backdrop, power grids are targets. And the key takeaway here, and it's a quote, is people tend to trust computers, need human judgment to stay involved to manage risk.
That seems to be the recurring theme here. You can't outsource your judgment to the machine.
Because the machine might be lying to you or being manipulated. In a world of deepfakes, human judgment is the only real firewall left.
Which leads us perfectly to the final and maybe the most critical section of this survey, the governance gap. We've talked about all these risks. Do we have the people and the systems to handle them?
And this brings us right back to that term you liked, velocity risk.
The speed problem.
It's a structural mismatch. The world changes daily, hourly sometimes. But the corporate governance model, the board meeting, was basically designed in the 19th century.
Boards meet once a quarter.
They read papers that were written 3 weeks ago. One respondent just asked the question, does the velocity of change mean old models for governance are broken?
You can't steer a Formula One car by sending a letter to the driver every 3 months.
That's it, you crash. And this creates what they call leadership deficit. The survey highlights a, frankly, worrying lack of board curiosity about AI.
A lack of curiosity. That seems negligent.
It's often fear masked as disinterest. Directors don't want to look stupid, so they don't ask the hard questions about the AI model. But if they don't challenge management, they're just rubber stamping black boxes. This is why the survey calls for decision hygiene.
Define that. Decision hygiene. It sounds like washing your hands before you vote.
In a way, it is. It means being rigorous about how a decision is made, not just what the outcome is. If an algorithm recommends a strategy, the board needs to ask, what data trained this? What are its biases? What happens if the model drifts? Hygiene means cleaning up the thinking process.
But how do you maintain hygiene when the referees, the government, keep changing the rules? The survey uses the phrase regulatory chaos.
It's the perfect description. The data points to uneven enforcement and erratic policy changes, specifically mentioning the U.S. administration's counterpressure on things like ESG and DEI initiatives.
And look, regardless of where you stand politically on ESG, that inconsistency is poison for business planning.
That's the whole point. It creates deep uncertainty. You might be required by law to report on carbon emissions in Europe while facing legal action for doing the exact same thing in the U.S.
So compliance is now a gamble on which rules will survive the next election.
It is.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this. We have a crumbling geopolitical order, AI that moves faster than human thought, climate mandates forcing consolidation, and a governance model that's just too slow. It feels overwhelming.
It is. But the DCRO Institute didn't publish this to depress everyone. They published it to spark action.
So what's the action? If I'm a director listening to this, what do I do differently tomorrow morning?
You have to shift from a compliance mindset to a decision oversight mindset. This is what the survey is calling risk management 2.0.
Okay.
You stop asking, did we pick the box?
Yeah.
And you start asking, is our board curious enough? Are we auditing our decision-making process, not just our financial results?
It's about waking up at the wheel.
Exactly. And I want to leave the listener with one final, very provocative thought that came directly from the survey. It's about governance during failure.
I saw that section. It's uncomfortable.
It should be. Most boards are designed for success. They have plans for growth, for profit. They're optimistic. But the survey warns that most organizations are unprepared to govern when assumptions break or when strategies have to be stopped or redirected.
Everyone looks like a genius in a bull market. The question is, what happens when it breaks?
Correct. When the agentic AI hallucinates and destroys a client relationship, when the supply chain snaps because of a new war, when sanctions hit, do you have the governance discipline to handle that?
Because failure is no longer just a possibility.
In 2026, it's a probability in some area of your business. The measure of success isn't avoiding failure entirely, it's how you govern through it.
That is the question I want every listener to sit with. Is your organization ready to govern through a failure? We're going to leave it there for today.
Hmm. A vital question for the year ahead.
A huge thank you to the DCRO Institute for providing this data. If you want to see the full 2026 Risk Governance Priorities Survey, I highly encourage you to find it on their website. It is well worth your time.